You're listening to Parasearch Radio. News, views and reviews
Brilliant.
From the world of the paranormal, from across the UK and beyond. Find us on Facebook, Twitter and the World Wide Web. The views and opinions expressed by presenters and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of Parasearch Radio or their affiliates and sponsors. Listener discretion is advised.
Good evening and welcome to the special interview show. My name is Kerry Greenaway and I've got the most amazing person in the studio with me tonight. I'm absolutely thrilled to pieces. Beth Darlington has been part of the paranormal for quite a few years now. Started her journey in the UK, went and lived in Australia, and is actually one of the, I would say, founders of the paranormal field over in Australia. She has now hit the UK again, and I've managed to get my grubby little mitts all over her. Good evening, Beth. How are you?
I am wonderful. Thank you, Kerry. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Now, I've very briefly touched on your journey in the paranormal field. So for people who don't know you, can you sort of explain your origins within the paranormal? What first got you into it?
Like with most of us who are doing this kind of thing, it was a few things, but mainly due to an experience, but also just the fascination of it. I always had a fascination of the possibility of objects moving on their own, the fascination of people possibly knowing premonitions or knowing information about people they could not logically have known the lines to. And then I had an experience when I was living in, was with my dad in his beautiful old home in Australia. Unfortunately, he sold it, which is a pain. It's a beautiful old historical house. And I also blame him for owning that particular house because it's inspired my interest in history and historical buildings and things like that. But I digress. And I had an experience there where my sister and I were sleeping. It was our very first night in this particular house, and we heard a sliding of a sound like a painting that had slid off the wall. Now, normally, it's 14 rooms in this place. He's making it into a bed and breakfast. It's 140 years old, which is very old in Australia. And we thought nothing of it at the time. It kind of woke us up a little bit and we kind of rolled over and went to sleep because at one point I said, "Oh, did you hear that?" And she's like, "Yeah, I heard that." But of course, I was only 16. I didn't have my investigator hat on back then. So, the night rolled on. Everything was fine. Breakfast the next morning. And I said, "Oh, Dad, I think one of the pictures must have fallen off the wall. We've got to go and find out because it woke us up." And he goes, "Well, what are you talking about?" I said, "Well, because we've just painted the whole interior. There's no pictures up at all. We're waiting for the paint to dry, remember?" I went, "Oh." I said, "But something slid off the wall and down." And he said, "No, there shouldn't be anything." So it was intriguing. It was something, could it be explained? Maybe, but it intrigued me and got me started into it. And of course, my dad and my mum have always been very skeptical people. Oh, there's, when you die, that's it. There's no afterlife. I wish there'd be a ghost that would, come up and say hello to me. I'll never have that in my lifetime, kind of stuff. So it's like, it was very interesting with my sister and I growing up, having the complete opposite belief to what our parents had. So I had that for many, many years. And then, of course, I moved to this fabulous country here in the UK 12 years ago now. And that's when I really got started because, yes, I did originally start watching those ghost TV shows, but I liked it in the sense of, it's not just something that you could read about, but you can actually be interactive about. You can find out your own answers and look for your own sort of, experiences. It was to experience something originally. And it just blew from there. So I once a month I would find somewhere, anywhere in London, and I would travel to some stupidly dangerous locations, and I mean dangerous in the sense there's a female on her own that's on a tube station waiting for the tubes to open, back then like at 3 a.m. sort of stuff, and in some fabulously interesting places in East London. And I survived, clearly, because I'm still here. And it was the best thing ever, once a month. So it was meant to be a working traveling holiday 2-year thing here originally, and it just ended up being the biggest explosion into the paranormal scene for me. So of course I'm all excited, thinking, great, my ex at the time that I was with, his visa was about to run out, so we're going back to Australia, doing all that kind of thing. I thought, I can do the same thing in Australia. when the tumbleweed rolls across the floor. And it was like, hello, hello, hello. There was nothing. There was nothing. There were history tours and there were ghost tours, but there was never something that was interactive paranormal investigating stuff. And I thought, nah, this has to change. But I thought there's nothing just for Australia for investigating. So I started Access Paranormal, and that's what it was for. It was just listings, directories. The directory now is international. So I've got people from Indonesia, Greece, Malaysia, everywhere around the world. And it used to be about events and also happening in Australia, so people could actually keep up to date with it. It was before Facebook really picked up with that kind of thing. Facebook actually now has kind of taken over that a bit more. You can really do some great searches on there, and you can find what you need. So I've pulled back a fair bit on that. But originally it was just all from the website saying, hey, look, you're from Australia, you're into paranormal investigating, here's a great website. And it's getting people together and finding this kind of stuff and learning. So because I got so much from having field experience from getting out there. So, and it just came from there. And then I joined a paranormal team for a year and a half, and I got some fantastic experience from that, being a case manager. And that's where part of my passion is, private and residential cases. And also understanding, interviewing people, finding it's a very different style of investigating, as we know, as opposed to looking at just having a public paranormal investigation in a public historical place often is. So it just has eventuated from there, and I was excited about online learning because it can access more people and people can get to it when they need to, because we don't get paid to do this, so it comes from our own time and money, so it has to be a time and a place which is convenient as well. So, and it just has blown from there, and I've just been so excited, and the more I learn, the more I make it as relevant as I can for paranormal investigators.
You certainly do that. I first came across yourself as Access Paranormal, where you were doing chats. So you was like, let's pick a topic and talk about it.
That's right.
And that is, I think that's what shows your ability the best, to be able to incorporate everybody's perspective and go, well, yeah, that could be that. I can't sit here and say it's not. But you do sit more on the sceptical fence of it's coming more from a psychological belief system side of things than you do anything else, but you're incredibly practical along with that. So when you go out investigating, you can, like you say, build the case on a more balanced viewpoint rather than shock hashtag it's a demon.
Yeah, it's it's funny because I definitely think at the moment that's where I'm kind of sitting, but I'm also open to the fact that maybe in 6 months, 12 months time, I'll actually lean towards, or you know what, there's actually probably more going on here from a paranormal perspective than more of a skeptical perspective. So I'm always open to swaying either way a little bit, but at the moment, yeah, you're right. It is from a more of a skeptical perspective, because I think I'm as I said, only recently in the last couple of weeks got to meet Dr. Chris Finch, and I was just fangirling as you do as a nerd.
Yeah, you would. I'm not gonna lie.
And he's such a lovely, lovely person. He can't be a horrible person. He has to be a really nice one as well on top of that. So it just makes you go, this is amazing. So I got to finally meet him after following his work for probably about 3 to 4 years. And it's very much based on let's look at a logical explanation first before we even entertain a paranormal one, I thought. And I've been already taking that philosophy on, not realizing it was actually something called anomalistic psychology. And so I thought, I find that is a healthier approach. It's not to completely dismiss. I think it's silly to completely do that. But a lot of stuff can happen to us where, say, for instance, someone's seen something or heard something. There could be 50 different reasons why that's happened. That could be explained, but we don't know. Or there's something else, we just don't know what it is. It may not be an afterlife. It may be something that we haven't actually discovered as yet, but it's happening. People are having it. It's a consistent experience. A lot of people all around the world, different cultures, but people are seeing apparitions of dead people or people that have passed on after they've passed on, hearing things, having footsteps. Footsteps are my favorite because they're so human. But, just give me a footstep any day.
No, nothing else is going to, like, it's so distinctive as well, a footstep.
It is. It's such a human thing. To me, I find that more human than a voice, because I think because of knowing a little bit about audible pareidolia, voices are the thing that we hear the most. So we're going to hear something, we're going to ascertain it to a voice, yes, or a word. So our minds are trained to hear familiarity in voices, like it is with visual pareidolia, seeing images that are going to keep us safe or make us, or something that's not safe. But I think with footsteps, it's kind of like this whole other realm where it's human and just, it's such a modern thing, and sometimes maybe not a modern thing. Sometimes you can hear soft shoes, and it's just like, it's fascinating. I know I need to get out more.
And we were both saying this earlier, we need to get out more, but I have to say you have been getting out and about. I want to take you back to when you hit Australia, was trying to build that network up. How daunting was that in a country, and I don't mean to be derogatory or disrespectful, but they're very practical people, Australians, aren't they? They see as you find. Do you know what I mean? That they don't muck about. They're kind of quite brutal in their sum up.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely.
And you're approaching them with quite interesting concepts about an esoteric subject, essentially. How was it going down when you was talking to people in a general, what class as Muggle people, about what you're trying to do and how you're trying to approach it and stuff like that? How was that received?
I feel like I could apply for the UN. there are times where it's a very, very difficult dance, but I think it's given me the best training to then venture out further into the world when it comes to the paranormal as well. People, like you said, people call a spade in Australia. So you know where you stand pretty quickly, and also what side of the fence you're sitting at as well. So, and when I mean that is in the sense of, obviously, as it would be, I would imagine here, you've got your believer camp and you've got your skeptic camp, and it's the same in Australia. So you know pretty soon where people sit with that kind of stuff. It has been a difficult dance, but one that it's helped me learn to navigate around. And when I mean navigate, it's not to necessarily dismiss either side, it's listening to either side and taking it on. Like if someone comes up to you with a phone and go, look, I've got a picture of an orb and, I can see a face in it, and that face right there, and they zoom in, that's my auntie. I'm like, yeah. That's incredible. That's a very significant thing for you. I'm not lying, but it is. I can't discount that. In the back of my mind, I wasn't there when that was taken. I can't verify any more than I can. They want verification from me. I can only say, yes, you have experienced that. Yes, you can see what you can see. And that's a completely different angle to saying it's a big bag of what, and you're full of what, and you can jam what when you know what. So like there's a lot of that happens on social media. I think there is a way in which you can at least help somebody understand their experience is their experience and not actually crap all over it, basically. People are going to be in the paranormal for very different reasons. To me, it's about intent. And once you understand someone's intent, then you know how to navigate around that person and understand where they're coming from.
I totally agree with that. Now, you have had, I've got to bring this up at this point, what's easier, actually, an Australian talking about the paranormal or an online troll? Because you've had this recently, haven't you?
Yes, I did. Well, I prefer, it depends. I think both are just as good as the other, to be brutally honest. And I'd actually, with all respect, enjoy both. Maybe not at the time, but I enjoy both. I think it's good because it helps me learn. I'm going to come across people that are quite abrasive. Last year in October, I was invited to be on a panel discussion at the Australian Skeptics Convention, which has been running for about 40 years. And from what I know, from the research I've done, I think I'm probably the newest in the recent years to have actually been invited to something like that. So for me to be able to have survived without a bulletproof vest at the Skeptics Convention, and then at the same, a month before that, I'm talking at Scarefest in Kentucky, where 8,000 people go through the doors in 3 days. And, it's a massive convention and people, and I'm talking about demonic possession in the Deep South, and I still survived that. So, it's like, do something each day that scares you. I've ticked all the boxes for the rest of my life. But but the people who are like that, where there can be abrasive investigators and or people that can be trolly and sit there and go, well, you seem too skeptical and you're not open-mindedness. It's like, oh, that's a bit of a shame because you actually haven't done your research. If you actually looked into my background, that I feel sorry for you, and that's where my angle comes from. It's like, damn, you throw your comment away like that. You have no idea about me. I'm actually really open-minded. I've had chalk from chalkboards fly at me. I've been sworn at by a Ouija board. I've had tables walk. I've seen tables walk. I've all sorts of stuff that I can't explain. And that's what we do. We are fascinated by the experiences that we have that make us ask more questions. So it's like, I'm going to come across people like this. And I like to explain and say, you know what? That's your thing. Maybe if we are more balanced, that would be great, and obviously I came back with that person in that particular moment and saying, yeah, you know what, I actually agree with you. And I've had somebody who is semi-well-known, I say semi-well-known, she's probably actually quite well-known, skeptic in America actually joined my mailing list years ago. And I sent something out about Ouija boards or something along the lines of that. And she came back with this big argument of, you're damaging by sending these hopeful emails out. And I'm like, well, if you actually looked at what you're saying, you would realize that a lot of the stuff I provide, I actually agree with your point of view of from a skeptical perspective. So it's not just people who want to believe in the paranormal that don't always do their research and get it wrong. It's also the skeptics as well. So, and quite well-known ones if they don't follow up. So it's just, it's like, come on, Dan, if you're going to come at me with some knowledge about knowing who I am a bit, and then we can have a good, healthy discussion. And I think that's the biggest part. Doing it from a place where it doesn't throw insults, that's a very difficult part to be with written word on social media.
Very much so. It's something we've all come across, I think. And I do think that there is a difference, actually, between healthy skepticism and cynicism. It's a topic we've discussed before on Parasearch Radio. And there are extremes in the skepticism world that are close to cynicism, and that's where you come across the most hard-headed people, I would say.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then you've got the muggles, bless them. I've named them the muggles. Thank you, J.K. Rowling, for that term.
Great, isn't it?
Who have just watched the TV programmes and have no knowledge beyond that. And that's about knowledge and information, giving them more information than what they've received on the television. And then you have the academics who approach it from a completely different ballgame. Now, this is something that's incredibly close to your heart and gets you very excited, and I can understand why. Because you've come back to the UK, and all I've seen you do is go SPR, ASAP, Ghost Club. It's just about hitting every box. But that's not for the accolade. It's for the knowledge those people have got, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's the access to the knowledge of those organisations that have been around for hundreds of years that you just don't get in Australia. The closest we've got in Australia is which we call is APR, which is AIPR, which is the Australian Institute of Parapsychological Research. That's the closest, and they've been around for a little while, and they have similar events, but they're very few and far between. And they go for maybe about half a day, a couple of sessions in that day, and that's fine, but we don't have the population in Australia to sustain more of those events. And that's another reason why being here in the UK is so beneficial, is because there's more of this. Like you said, I've hit the ground running because I can hit the ground running. In Australia, I'd be sitting for 6 months waiting for something. It's just hello. It's like it's nothing. So it's about getting this particular knowledge and absorbing it in a way that, okay, how is this going to help people when they take on a private case or they want to go out to a public location? Because people are going to want to do that. But this information and the research that's been and fabulous amounts of research and data that's been happening for hundreds of years from all different types of people. Some of that is actually, a good chunk of that is actually quite relevant to what we do as investigators. Maybe there's information they've come up with or ideas or different methods that can actually be implemented for what we're doing in paranormal investigating. And that's my biggest passion is kind of helping decipher that in a way that we can all understand it. I do not have a university background. I've never been to university. If you could see me on camera, I'm taking a physical hat off at the moment, like literally to anybody who's ever been to university. It's the university is fabulous, but to me, the way in which they teach is not my style of learning, but it doesn't mean that I need to miss out on the information that they would teach. So how am I going to access that? And that's how I get, excited about it. So that's why going to SPR and to conferences and hearing and talking to people and interacting, that's how I learn. I can't do it from essays and research papers. I do try to, and I absorb what I can, but I can understand why people shy away, because the terminology it's foreign to me. I'm like, I have no idea what half that word, that paragraph, I have to read it a few times, get it into my head and rewrite it the way I would understand it.
Exactly.
It's almost like being a translator, but the information is valuable because these people have, and they are paranormal experts. They, to me, are the paranormal experts. They're the ones that have gone out there and had the field experience. They've done the research. They're the ones that we should be pulling the information in and actually being able to see whether or not it is something that we can actually use in our modern day investigating.
And that's the whole key, isn't it? Trying to get that crossover of fields so we all work together and bring the field closer together. Now, do you think at present time, from your very short experience in the UK on this occasion, that there is a void between those institutes and the paranormal field?
Absolutely. And that was one of the questions that came up at SPR. For their conference. It was actually, funny enough, Ashley Nibbs talk. He did a quick talk for 10, 15 minutes sort of thing about some of the cases he's dealt with. And that was actually one of the questions because he said, there is a bit of a difference between, the academics and the peeps like ourselves, or common or laymen as they call it. And I said to him, well, what thoughts do you have about branching that? And he's like, well, look, it's early days in that regard. People need to really look into how they're going to do that. For myself, I think for me, it's my passion, as I said before, is pulling that information. That's why I'm involving and literally catapulting myself into these institutions and becoming members and going to the study days and taking this information in and going, right, how would this be beneficial for us? I think there needs to be somebody to try and do that. But at the same time, I think it's a two-way street. So again, it's about intent for the investigator. Do you want to know this information? Yes. Okay. Then there should be a want to be able to go to these organizations and at least try and learn at least a little bit, read something. Or yes, as I said, with SPR, once you become a member, you've got access to their online library. You can have a look at what kind of books they've got there. And if you're lucky enough to be here in the UK and or London at any time, you can then obviously pop into the library and actually borrow it yourself. But of course, there's online papers as well. So it's like how motivated are paranormal investigators to want to learn more and take it to that next step. And it's funny, I think there's a growing need for it. I think sometimes people like myself have started watching those ghost shows and, being all practical and sort of, using your EMF meters and taking photos and going, oh, there's something that's turned up. Oh, there's an orb. I don't know what that is now, completely knowing what that is. But that takes time. And I didn't have someone shooting down at me on social media saying that what you've posted is a bag of shit. What it was me actually learning gradually over time how my equipment works. And so I wasn't shying away from learning. I think sometimes the way in which people provide information about something that's quite simple can actually really shut someone down, and they will go the opposite way. But I think it's an intent thing. I think it's an intent of the investigators. Do they really want to do this? Do they want to actually learn a bit more? At the moment, approaching organisations like ASIP and SPR and Ghost Club is a start, but I can understand where that falters. It also needs to come back the other way as well. For my personal opinion, there needs to be, I don't want to say it's not a dumbing down. It's not a dumbing down. It's just a reword. It's a rewording of it. It's a re-explanation of it. And that's what I really liked about ASIP's conference and it's not to take it away from SPR at all. It's a lot about people's research and data finding. ASIP's one was really good because it was topical. One of the talks was about all the different types of hell, all around the world, different beliefs in it. This is fascinating, like this kind of stuff and why people believe in hell and what makes them fear it. And then and negative near-death experiences that are connected to that as well. Like that's interesting stuff. And it was a great talk. And it's that kind of stuff. So I think it needs to be a branching of both sides, but I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon. It's got to be a gradual thing.
I do think it's small steps in big ways, and I have noticed myself watching some of the live feeds of people just going out doing their normal things. There is actually a progression. It's gaining momentum, and concepts that wasn't being spoken about 5 years ago are now being accepted, like orbs of dust, for example. Yes, everybody probably started thinking, oh, spiritual manifestation, right there, got it on a camera. But that now, and generally across the paranormal field, it's known. That's something that's come out of one of these institutes, actually came out from ASAP's research on orbs. And the field have taken that on, and it's just a slower filtering down through the levels, I would suppose you would call it, into the ghost investigation scene. See, I've changed my terminology on this recently. I used to call it ghost hunting, and I've actually changed my terminology to ghost investigating.
And that's another thing as well is I've always seen myself as a paranormal investigator, not a ghost hunter, and that's another thing that also came up in ASAP's conference. Was someone said one of the topics was, or one of the talks was, I'm not a ghost hunter, because she was a paranormal investigator. And then she talked about the differences. Her name was Anne, I think it's Anne Winsper, a fabulous, great mind, really into her research and her data. And she was, talking about the differences of it. Like, okay, so and that's what I liked about with ASAP's conference, was because it's explaining to people who have a very strong academic background in this, hey, this is modern stuff that's been going on, and you may poo-poo it, but you know what? This is actually what's happening with it. This is how people who ghost hunt do it. And these are obviously, which is very different at the moment to what paranormal investigators traditionally do. So it's actually explaining it. And I think that's the first bridge, is to say, hey, this is what other people are doing because of those TV shows. This needs to be explained to people of academia, so they can get a better understanding of why people are doing what they're doing. Just do they agree with it? Probably not. I think mostly not, but it doesn't matter. I think they still need to know. And it was a really, really good talk. But I know what you mean. It's the terminology. I like what you say. Like, it does change, and I think it will change again as well. There's a middle ground paranormal investigator that's not. It's not somebody who's just picked up a K2, and it's not somebody who's doing psychical research on Zener cards. It's the middle person, which is sort of in the middle of that. And I think that group is growing, and no one's really servicing that group. No one's actually saying, okay, here's some information that's not going to be so academic. It's like eating a lemon. You're actually going to understand this and utilize it.
That's right. And like I said, it filters down through. And talking to people like you on podcasts and, reading blogs from people, those are what makes these concepts and these terminologies and these studies more accessible to people. Mm-hmm. Now, one of the things you keep mentioning is about data, the data collection. What kind of data collection is looked for? What sort of things is needed to be collected in investigations?
Great question. Really great question. I think for me personally, when I've come across other people's research, it's data. So with SPR, there was a lovely gentleman. His name escapes me, which is terrible. It is a Sunday night, and I've only had 4 hours sleep from the world's largest ghost hunt, so I shall sleep well tonight. And he's been doing about 10 to 15 years worth of EVP research, in the sense of the type of words, and the type of names that come up, and what comes up, and where it comes up, and how it comes up. And so I think that's been interesting, that kind of data, and then the fact that is there an intelligence behind it? Is there like a sort of a hierarchy of intelligence of words that come through? And what I mean by that is in the sense of, he'll ask a question and he'll say, it's not for you to know. It's like, well, who allows this then? Why is it not for me to know? If that's the response I get back from what I hear on a voice recorder. So little things like that, I think that's the kind of data I think is relevant when it comes to paranormal investigating. And I think that's the kind of stuff that we need to at least learn from, because if someone's doing this and getting these kinds of responses, then, okay, that's one case of that. And what about, from a visual perspective, or what about another one? I think it's that kind of data is very, very beneficial for what we do. I think it's something that should be at least explained out to people, saying, hey, someone else has experienced this and has researched this. Are we having the same thing? And also, of course, around the world, not just here in the UK.
Do you think that the people that are doing the data collection, I'm copying your accent there, your data collection, are not reaching out to the paranormal community in general so they can gather more data in that way?
Yeah, I think it is very isolated. I think, but it depends how people have their study and their research conducted as well. There was a lovely, beautiful lady called Ursula, and again, I forgot her surname, so she's going to kill me. And I met her originally at ASIPS, and then she was actually talking at SPRs, and she's talking about people's paranormal beliefs, but she wants to talk to anybody and everybody that's had a paranormal belief. So she's really wide opening it. And then there are other people that do it really quite closed. I think it would be more beneficial where people who are doing these kinds of studies actually bring in people that are doing more field experience, is what they call it. The people that are out there in locations like last night and all other places, or taking on private cases and going, I'm doing a study on this. Do you fit the criteria? Great, bring you in. I don't think there's enough data and research collected on the people actually actively investigating. It's more about people's general society paranormal experiences. There's not a lot going on about people who actually are investigating. I think that's where you're going to really find the meaty stuff, the really good data, good research.
I totally agree with that. I do totally agree with that. Now, you've mentioned a couple of times you do private cases. And I've come across a case in Australia recently. It's a poltergeist case. I've only just heard about it. I love the name. It's the Dumpty-Doo poltergeist case. Is that a case you came across whilst you was in Australia?
I have heard of it. I don't know a lot of it, but I certainly have heard of it. I love. That's the one thing about Australia, man. We have the weirdest terminology.
I loved it. It's not one I'm going to forget. It's like one of those things you think, oh, I'll look into that a bit deeper. And then you go back like 2 weeks later, you think, oh, what was the name of that case? Or where was that case that I saw about I was going to look into? I've got time to look into it. Damn it, I can't remember what it was. This one, you're not going to forget.
Yeah, I know. And we've got places like Wagga Wagga and, Dunedoo. They were actually going to build a great big toilet as a way to try and help people remember all sorts of stuff. Like people have the great big prawn or the great big pineapple, but they were going to have a great big toilet there. But anyway, Australia's fabulous in that way. We do not take we're serious, but we don't take ourselves seriously. It's just this weird combination. It'll mess your head, but hey, the weather's great. But yeah, it's and we do have particular cases, like high profile cases like that with poltergeists and stuff like that, and this is obviously it's like a very similar thing with here with the Enfield poltergeist as well, which is well renowned, sort of thing. But yeah, it's. I
really want to get my hand on the transcripts. Is all I'm saying. I would love to get my grubby little mitts on the original recordings recorded as it happened. I mean, you get clips out on the internet and stuff like that, but I kind of want the whole thing.
No, yeah, you need to hear. And that's like with most recordings, hear it from go to woe. Don't hear the bit that's just been cut out. You'll get more from what you hear before and after.
Exactly. It helps you build that picture up, doesn't it?
That's right. That's right.
Oh dear. Well, I have to say, and it was actually Humpty Doo, everybody, not the Dumpty Doo. But in my head, I always go Humpty Dumpty, so it's interchangeable now in my head. Just saying, it was the Humpty Doo poltergeist case.
The Enfield poltergeist. I'll just change it.
Of all the cases you've come across in your work, what's been the most baffling for you?
It was actually one that had what we suspected, and it's very difficult to say, but it was Australian Indigenous energy. And that's a very different ball game, because in Australia, it's almost like trying to crack into the Secret Service. particularly if you're not Australian Indigenous yourself, it's very, very, very difficult. A lot of the beautiful Indigenous people in Australia don't actually talk about death, or it's very frowned upon to do so. So to actually get information about how to deal with if you feel like you have a haunting that could be Indigenous is very difficult. So when you come across one, it's kind of like, oh, okay, we're going to come to a bit of a brick wall here. We don't really have much to go on with this. Luckily enough, at the time, I still have a contact in Sydney, in Australia, and she's very, very open about talking about beliefs of Indigenous people when they pass on. Doesn't feel threatened or needing to hide from it. I've asked her why. She was actually even, I think probably about 5 or 6 years ago, I had her actually do a talk to paranormal investigators about what to do if you actually did come across something. And it was really great, really informative, because it's obvious. Unfortunately, in Australia, we don't grow up with a very strong knowledge of Indigenous cultures, but our own. And that's a real issue. That I could talk about that for another hour in itself. I think it's horribly wrong and it needs to change. It should be part of our more closer part of our school curriculum in Australia. But so she was able to talk about, the spirituality, the beliefs a little bit more. I mean, a lot of people know about the dream time and the general side of it, but not when Indigenous people pass away. What happens? What's their thoughts? What do you do when something like that happens? Like, hypothetically, if somebody was to say to someone else, what do you think someone would do if you thought someone was possessed? Well, I'd get a priest in, and the priest would have holy water, and he would have a cross, and you kind of get a gist of it. Hollywood has something to do with it, and it's nowhere near as dramatic, but you've got an idea of what happens. But when it comes, okay, so if you've got an Indigenous haunting or your possible one, what would you do? And like, there are crickets in the background. People have no idea. I had no idea. Like, what would you do?
They're very close-mouthed, those. The Indigenous people of Australia have been very close-mouthed about their spirituality and their belief systems. It's slowly changing, but that's only because the youngness of the country, and I think there's been loggerheads and land being taken over and territory rights and stuff like that that's overshadowed everything else. And you want to maintain your culture but not want to share it with somebody who is clearly not going to be open and understand it. Whereas now that's changing and they are starting to talk and be more open, aren't they? But it's still very rudimentary what we can access about their culture and their belief systems. So to get somebody like this lady that you're talking about would have been invaluable. Oh,
yeah. And to have access. And I still have an access to her. And she's been great. And because I actually approached the Indigenous Council and just said, look, these things are happening. Is there anybody in your council that can help us with this? I will get back to you. Nothing. But the thing is, though, I have to also respect that too. It's like, well, I'm asking them to put themselves out there in a way that makes them feel uncomfortable. But I'm at loggerheads. So, and in this particular case, it was like I was very, very lucky to have this woman to have access to. And she said, okay, burning gum leaves is a big thing. It's almost like burning sage. So, but it's the Australian version of that, or Indigenous version of that. So that's the first thing you do. And there's other steps that she went through, and it was very calming. And I thought, okay, maybe there is an Indigenous energy here. We don't know. Let's try something. And that's the other thing, being a skeptical, open-minded person, like, let's give it a shot. We burn some leaves. We do stuff. We have intent. We want these people to be okay. Maybe something will work from this. Maybe I will actually learn something apart from thinking, okay, maybe it's not going to happen. I'm open to that. Your mind's like a parachute. It works better when it's open, right?
Exactly.
So a parachute was open. Beth was actually learning, and it ended up helping immensely. They were actually able to settle in their home after doing these things that she had said. But also at the same time, it helped me remind me the fact that there are some mediums and psychics that may know what they are doing and do have good advice, and that can be really difficult to find. It's like finding a needle in a haystack, to find a really good medium psychic that actually says, no, I actually can sense what's going on here. It's not about myself. This is what I can see what's happening. This is what you can try and do to fix it or help things move on. And they're very rare, and I've only really come across maybe one or two in the sort of 10 years I've been doing this. So, oh my God, it's almost 11 in November. Crap. Time flies when you're having fun. So, yeah.
It certainly does.
It's a learning experience. But yeah, that has been the most intriguing one, was the Indigenous case, because it really had to force me. And the thing is, there's been cases where I've dealt with where there's been Islamic energy in the home, and with a beautiful Turkish family who were having all sorts of stuff going on, and it was scaring the kids, and they're like, we don't know what's going on. And it was like, okay, so we had to try and find somebody who was a medium who also was quite well aware of the Quran. So that was another challenge as well. And that helped in the end too, because it's, you're speaking Swahili to somebody who speaks Celtic. It ain't going to happen. Maybe it can in the spiritual world, but I think it's smoother if you're kind of on the same wavelength. And that was another thing I learned.
Yeah, understanding firstly understanding the deep set cultural belief systems of whatever country you're in and whatever area you're in, and then using that environmental, natural world to help bring that back into balance and bring that resonance back into evenness through spiritual belief is very, very current thought pattern in regards to how we view the paranormal. Now, having said that, I've said belief system quite a lot there in that statement. That is a very big effect, isn't it, on how people experience?
Absolutely. And you can't fight it. You cannot fight it. There was a lovely man last night at the world's largest ghost hunt at the Viaduct Tavern in London. Beautiful individual, but just absolutely set on his thoughts about orbs. Absolutely, 100%. I'm not just okay, here's one. It's every time you take a photo, there's going to be one there. But every time you take a photo, there's going to be one there. To me, so but I'm not going to sit there and say, well, what you're saying is a bag of crap. You cannot fight with it, and it can be as frustrating as all get out, because I'm sure there are people that speak to me and try and sort of, I guess you'd say, some way convince me of something paranormal, and I'm sitting there thinking, would also feel the same way, so it's a two-way street. I've got to be aware of it too. I'm like, okay, I've got to maybe kind of bend a little bit, but beliefs are so strong, and confirmation bias is just rife. Mm-hmm. We all have it. I've got it. Everyone's got it.
Yeah, I've totally got it.
Far out. Totally. Everybody's got it. Everyone's got it. But it's just the first step is awareness. It's awareness going, yeah, I'm probably going to be more biased to the fact that your paranormal experience wasn't. That's the first thing for me. I'm like, probably wasn't, may have actually been something explainable, because A, I wasn't there. B, the what you call evidence is a lack of, in the sense of it's not consistent. You haven't got multiple ways in which to verify. So this wasn't just a video recording, wasn't just a photo. It's just like a one photo. It's not a multiple way of being able to suss out what was happening at the time with different types of equipment. It's like saying to somebody, Kerry, I've got a really sore knee. Can you tell me what's wrong with it? And it's like, mate, there could be like 50 different reasons why your knee is sore. I can't diagnose that, because there could be 50 different ways why someone may have seen an apparition. Mm-hmm. But I think I've seen one in myself as well. So it's a daily argument within me. But yeah, beliefs are very strong. And again, as you know, with the whole paranormal and investigating, you come across them all the time. You cannot fight with them. They're going to be there, whether people believe or not. So it's both sides. It's not just people who want to believe. It's people who don't want to believe as well, or think everything is completely explainable, and we're just all hokey pokey with it. You're going to come across that. you can't take it personally. That's the biggest thing out of all of it. You can't take it on as an insult to yourself. It's how people are built. They're going to be built like that. It's the way in which we communicate to each other that's going to be the key.
I totally agree. And going on to more about internal belief systems, they're multi-leveled. And I think people overlook the fact that they might not now believe it, but you once believed it. So that's a remnant still in there that could come forward in your investigations. So when you say you need to be aware, it's aware of self and actually your own personal journey and experiences you've gone through that could be colouring the experience that you've had.
Absolutely. It is 100%. And I think, we use investigating as a way to help finances of the afterlife. But at the end of the day, we should also use it as a way to help understand other people. And their experiences. I think that's equally as important, or understanding the next person you're going to be investigating with that you may not have met yet, or was just joined the team, or you're in a public sort of event of some sort. I think it's vital in that sense as well, going, I understand what you're coming from because I've actually had that experience myself as well.
Totally agree with that. Now, you've said it a couple of times again, you was out last night on the world's largest ghost hunt. Can you explain to me what that's about? The world's largest ghost hunt. Was everybody out investigating last night? Because I wasn't.
The rest of London was quiet. No, never. I was very, very fortunate 4 years ago to actually be at the very first one at the headquarters in Kentucky in America at Scarefest for the first one. So they actually ended up having massive screens. They had about 3 massive screens, and they had them all divided up, of course, of all the different video feeds of all the different people having investigating going on. So you could actually walk into this room, sit down and watch about 10 different investigations, and they would swap them around. I think it was every 10 minutes they would actually show different ones from different countries all around the world happening at the same time. And it was just incredible. I'm into the paranormal. #mind blown. So it was like, this is really cool. And all at the same time, and the thing is, at that particular one, which was the very first one, it was more kind of engineered also by a guy called Brian Kano, if anyone has heard of him before. He's part of Haunted Collector, lovely guy, fabulous mate of mine. He actually set up a bit of a project with that too at the time. So he said, all right, I've secretly given out particular questions to these groups. They have to ask from an EVP perspective and then see what comes back, and then collect, and then we had to send their responses in by a certain time, and then they had a database. Yes. So it was actually for a purpose. And I was like, this is great. All around the world, people asking the same question to what is considered what we believe is the spiritual world. Is it going to come back as the same? And they had some really interesting results from that. I think there was one random word he didn't think was actually going to be said was actually one of the words. And of course, right now it escapes me. But
4 hours sleep, people. 4 hours sleep. All I'm saying.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, absolutely. We're just going to roll that for a while. But yeah, it was. But I loved the methodology behind it. I was like, it's not just getting out there and investigating and celebrating it. It's actually for a purpose, and that was really, really cool sort of thing. They didn't do it this year. I don't think they've done it for the last previous years, but I do like the celebratory fact of it. It's just this, where people register through this website, people hold paranormal investigations in particular locations and actually raise money for historical buildings. Generally, that's what we investigate in. So, all the funds go back towards these locations that need upkeep, and that's another big part of it as well. It's preserving history, and that's another reason why I'm a sort of big fan of it in that way, sort of thing. The last couple of years I haven't been able to because the date had shifted to when I was in America, and then of course wasn't able to. But this year was like, okay, I'm getting into it again. It was really good. So I do like the method behind it. I'm Marie, who runs it. She's an amazing woman, a fabulous lady. She was so excited the fact that I was a part of it in London as opposed to Australia, as opposed to the US, sort of thing. So bless her, she's good person. but there's good intent behind it, and that's the thing is, again, when it comes to intent, it says everything, and that's what I stand behind, and that's where I navigate to. And I like the intent of this and the fact that it was able to promote historical locations and also paranormal investigating being something. I mean, of course, they use the term ghost hunting, but it's a more general term. The general public's going to want to know it and that kind of thing. So, such a great event. Such a great event.
So, how did your event go last night?
It was cool. It was really good. A couple of interesting things. I think a lot of it I was doing a more traditional observation of it all, seeing how the team were working, seeing how their experiences were occurring, what they were seeing, what they were hearing. Some things I also heard as well, which was really, really cool. I did hear what I believe could have been footsteps. But it's obviously on audio recording, so I'll obviously review back to that as well. And as I said, I literally, because I've just moved over, I don't really have a lot of equipment, if at all. So I was kind of literally leaning on everyone else's experiences a little bit. But it was really great. And it's the Viaduct Tavern. So to me, I remember sneaking into the bathrooms when I was here maybe 10, 12 years ago, just so I could be around the cellar area that's where a lot of the claimed poltergeist activity has been happening, to the point where staff won't go down there on their own. There'll always be two, because the door shuts and people can't get out. So obviously being near a jail, and obviously being just outside the execution area of London there too. Obviously if you want to look at and explore about the afterlife when it comes to people's energies, moving in and around in a particular area, then it's a hot spot for that kind of stuff as well. And it's the last and oldest gin palace that's existing in this great conditional form. So, and it's beautiful inside. Like you walk in, you just think it's just exquisite. And I love old buildings. So, twist my arm in all different directions, and I just, it's just crazy. It's the best stuff. I just slightly passionate, if you can't already tell. So.
No, it's fantastic to hear. We love to hear the passion from people in the paranormal field. It's one of the things that keeps us in the field, amongst some of the dramas that unfold. And when you get somebody who's as passionate as yourself about the paranormal and are focused on the research and the history and the phenomena and the why, the mechanics, it's fantastic to talk to and bring your voice out to the UK audience that are listening. Good evening, chat room, by the way. I'm not ignoring you. Just saying, because they're talking away in the chat room. I'm just like talking to you. I'm like, yeah, whatever. But thank you for joining us whilst we're talking to Beth. Now, what is on your bucket list for the UK? You must have a huge, huge bucket list. And living in the hub of London, I could imagine it's probably very centred on where you're going to be centred at this moment in time. Are you staying in London, or are you looking to branch elsewhere in the UK?
I will be centred in London, not too far from where I'm at the moment, which is just South London, like literally on the Thames at the moment, but I will be a little bit further away. But I actually, because a lot of the focus has been, going to events at the moment, and then obviously trying to find a fabulous place to live, fingers crossed that works out. I actually haven't sat down and actually gone, okay, so where are some really bucket list stuff that I want to do? My lovely sister is coming over in a couple of weeks, and she's like, I want to do Windsor Castle. And I'm like, it's going to be a little interesting as far as the paranormal, but I'm sure we can do a day tour. As I said, I recently had gone to the Tower of London, and I was like geeking out there and sort of like absorbing as much as I can from that as well. And it's just, I know, in its they're going to start paranormal tours or Halloween tours, I guess you could say, obviously off from Halloween onwards kind of stuff. So I think a lot's going to kick off in the next month here as far as access to those kinds of locations, those iconic locations. Yes, there won't be investigation stuff. It'll be more so a history, ghost tours, experiences, that kind of stuff, which it's an introduction as such, but I twist my arm. I'll still be enjoying it anyways. Like, as I said, it's like meeting a celebrity. I'll be happy with that.
Exactly.
But
I think that shows, though, that they're starting to understand that there is a trade, very lucrative trade for these big locations like the Tower of London and other places like that, where if they're needing funds, we can help support that. you know, because we are hiring them out for investigations or ghost walks or ghost talks and stuff like that. So they're starting to become more open to that, whereas before they never would have really approached that side of it. It's almost like, yes, we don't talk about that. In a lot of the locations owned by the Crown anyway.
Oh God, yeah. Anything that's got the Crown on it, it's like, I'd love to. No, it's got the Crown on it. Oh God, I'll never get in there. That's just how it is. It's like the door just shut. It's like, no.
You need the Queen's permission for that. Well, okay, can I talk to the Queen?
I'll just knock on Buckingham Palace. Like, hello, just from Australia, mate. Yeah, that's it. Just want to get into one of your buildings. Is that all right?
Probably get away with that, to be fair. They'll go, oh, she's Australian, it's fine. So what teams have you connected with in your local area that you're trying to get out with that have got access to certain locations?
Well, there's a lovely, lovely lady called Jackie Foster that I've been in contact with over the years, and she's based in the Cornwall area, so I'm going to hopefully be able to catch up with her. There's Penny Griffiths-Morgan I'm hoping to also be able to catch up with as well. Beautiful, beautiful lady. And also as yourself at some point.
Of course.
Of course.
That's right. That's already in the future.
I'm just saying. But, and obviously I actually signed up for the next social event for City Paranormal of London, their next social event as well. So go along to that. I mean, it literally is going to be within walking distance somewhat of where I'm living. So, it'd be silly for me not to go. Like, it's just, it's a no-brainer kind of thing. So bit by bit, just gradually kind of getting out there sort of thing. So it's just finding another group or finding a person or finding a contact and then kind of branching out from there and just going, okay, that's cool. Where can I help? How can I be a part of this? What can I help with you with? And how can I contribute to help, make this better for you as far as investigating or add something to what you're doing, that kind of stuff sort of thing. And learning too. I never stop learning. I'm not going to sit there and go, I know everything, I'm not that kind of person. It's like,
I don't think you can in this field because there's so many avenues and rabbit holes you go down, and every rabbit hole I go down comes a million other rabbit holes, and it's like, where do I go? What do I do? Because I'm being dragged in this direction, that direction, and I love it all, so I don't want to have to hone my research down to a specific area, if that makes sense.
It does. It totally does. Absolutely. But it's intriguing. Like I've said to one person, quite a few times, I may have to change my terminology, so please excuse, but I call it chasing the dragon. And someone said, well, that's what people say when you have, heroin addiction. I'm like, okay, I probably should change that. But it is chasing the dragon. Yeah, and you've seen a glimpse of the dragon. You've heard the glimpse of a dragon. You've seen something. It's something that's there, and you're chasing it. You're wanting to find the answers. Why did you see it? When did you see it? Who else has seen it? It is literally chasing the dragon, and that's what I've always thought of the paranormal as. And I will continue to chase the dragon for a long time yet.
Before we let you go, I've got one last question for you. You're in a very unique position where you've been worked in the UK and investigated here. You've done that in America on their field and in Australia as well. But there's a whole chunk of world still that is very quiet, I would say, on the paranormal investigation field. You don't hear a lot out of them, which is the Europes and the big continent of Africa, that area. What can we do to bring those people more forward into the paranormal, knowing that you've done that through Australia?
That's a really great question. I think it's firstly understanding what their limitations are with joining the rest of the world, if you could call it that. I have I've got more listings of people looking to join teams, paranormal teams in India on my page than I do on any other country, more than America. And that's incredible because you think, is it a population thing, or is it more just the fact that people have an avenue now to be able to talk about that and want to learn about that? So I'm intrigued about it. Let's bring the rest of the world in with this. Not to say that the rest of the world is away from us three sort of superpowers in any way, shape, or form. The rest of the world still exists long before we ever sort of danced upon the planet, but I think it really is going to be something about understanding, getting the people. People need to know where to go. People need to know where to find groups, people, learning. I mean, obviously, internet's it's just amazing. YouTube and Google and Facebook and stuff like that. I think that's going to help, but it's really understanding why. It's understanding and getting those people involved as well. And I mean, not all of us can afford to travel. So is there ways in which people can still learn and be a part of this without actually having to travel anywhere to do this? I think that's also another thing as well. Not everybody has internet too, which is another big thing too. So keeping that in mind. I mean, I remember when I was in the Ukraine 2.5 years ago, and that was a whole other experience. When it came to the paranormal, it's like, oh my gosh, it's different belief systems and different way of life and different thoughts and different environments. I'm thinking, okay, so if people were involved or wanting to be paranormal investigators in this country, what could they do? I'm like, probably not a lot. Considering where they were and what they were doing and stuff like that. So I was like, so I can see there would be restrictions with that. You'd be fascinated by a topic, but where would you could go to be able to do it anymore with it? So, I think it's finding these people, understanding it, and then, being as welcoming as we should be when it comes to great topics like it is.
Awesome. On that note, we've actually come to the end of the special interview for tonight. I would love to have you back on Parasearch Radio, Beth, because you're absolutely fantastic, and your passion is inspirational and infectious, I think is the word.
Thank you. Hopefully it's a good infection.
It's a very good infection. Very good infection. What's next for you? What's in the immediate next for you?
Immediate next, I'm actually looking at joining ASIP's training weekend in November. So I want to actually, and their training weekends for investigating is very much about private cases, really understanding interviewing skills, all that kind of stuff. So I'm really excited about enrolling in that very soon. So that's my next thing. And of course, with my sister coming over in a couple of weeks, we might be able to do a couple of ghost tours or ghost walking tours in the meantime, because I'll need to get my fix between now and then. So as you do, chasing the dragon, blah blah blah. So that's looking at the next on the horizon. Also, my videos that have become very, very popular, I'm actually going to be bringing them back. And I'll actually mention here as well, they'll actually not be weekly, they'll be monthly, but they'll be for longer. So I'll be doing like invites for them on Facebook and a lot more promotion with them as well. And they're going to actually be a little bit more meatier, a little bit more hands-on, and a little bit more tips as well as and helpful information in it too. So they're going to be a little bit more hands-on in that regard. So that's going to be coming back very soon.
Awesome. That's fantastic news. On that note, I'd like to say thank you so much for joining me tonight. It's been an absolute pleasure to actually pin you down and speak to you properly for an hour rather than the odd text here and there.
That's so true.
It's so true. Now, don't forget, everybody, if you miss any of our shows, you can go over to our YouTube channel where you need to click like, share and subscribe, and let us know what you think. If there's anything you'd like us to cover on Parasearch Radio, get in touch. Check out our blogs on parasearch.org, and tomorrow I'll be going live on the Parasearch Radio Facebook page to give you the weekly rundown of shows. On that note, I'd like to bid you all a very farewell. Good night.
Thank you for listening. Don't forget to join us for more shows throughout the week. Find us on Facebook, Twitter, and the World Wide Web to keep up to date with all the shows right here on Parasearch Radio.